So, what is X Men First Class exactly? Is it a prequel or is it a reboot? I guess it's a prequel, right? Hey, everybody, this is David, and today I'm going to be talking about X Men First Class, the movie directed by Matthew Vaughn. So, basically, this X Men movie was sort of supposed to be like a prequel to the original X Men films, even though they took some liberties to kind of change things around a little bit or ignore certain things that happened to make this story work. And I'm going to tell you the truth. I think it was the right decision to make because I think even though Bryan Singer later fixed some of those continuity errors with X-Men Days of Future Past, X-Men First Class, if this wasn't going to be, a direct, if Singer didn't fix things later on, I would have been okay with this one kind of rebooting the X-Men franchise because I think X-Men First Class is actually one of the most funnest X-Men movies to date, and I don't think it's the most. I don't think it's underlooked. I think this is a movie that a lot of fans can agree with that it is a fun movie, and that's what X-Men needs to have a little bit sometimes. It needs to have that fun, and I'm glad Matthew Vaughn, the director of Kick-Ass and Kingsman: The Secret Service, directed this film. It really showed that this guy needs to direct more superhero movies. It makes me wonder why they didn't get him to direct Fantastic Four, because he probably would have been a better choice than Josh Trank. We have this whole new group of X-Men, plus a few familiar ones that we know, obviously played by new actors in this movie. This is the one that Jennifer Lawrence was in before appearing in the Hunger Games films the year afterwards. And so you can kind of say that X-Men First Class was the one that really started her career, but I think people recognize her more with the Hunger Games. But yeah, she plays Mystique here, which Mystique becomes more of an anti-hero in these films, which gives her an interesting spin on her character. This is not my favorite Mystique movie, not my favorite movie with Mystique, but I think she does do a really good job, and you care about her as a character, especially where she goes in the upcoming film, the films that follow after this one. The highlights to me are Magneto and Xavier, their friendship together, their splitting up together at the end of the film. Everything that starts and ends with them is really, for me, the highlight of the film. I really love Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy's connection here, and you really see that grow even in X-Men Days of Future Past, and hopefully we'll get a little bit more of that in X-Men Apocalypse, because I think this friendship really blossoms a lot in these movies. Especially by the time you get to the end of the film where they finally split apart, you actually feel for that breaking up, that you feel bad for both of those characters, because Magneto is this anti-hero also. He's kind of getting redemption on what happened to him in the past, but at the same time, Professor Xavier has hope for this guy, thinks that he can go down the right path, but instead Magneto goes down the wrong path, and well, we know eventually where he'll end up. Or do we? Because Days of Future Past, the film that follows after this movie, kind of tells us that maybe things won't go the way we thought it will. We'll have to wait and see. Nicholas Hoult plays Beast in this movie, taking over the role that Kelsey Grammer played in X-Men The Last Stand. And I actually think his Beast is really good. Obviously, he's a much younger Beast, so he's playing it a little bit differently than what Kelsey Grammer played in The Last Stand. And I think he fits the role rather nicely. He's someone who's uncomfortable in his own skin and doesn't want to look different, but then he's forced to be different. And it kind of parallels Mystique's storyline a little bit, where she's someone that doesn't want to be different in the beginning, but then starts to embrace the side of being different later on, while Beast at the end still feels that he wants to hide because he looks totally different. And so there's an interesting parallel there between him and Mystique. We get a couple of other new characters too, but they're very minor as far as I'm concerned. The villain, Kevin Bacon, plays Shaw, and I think he's really good as a villain. And before this movie, It was either Stryker or Sabretooth or Magneto as the main villains, so it was actually really refreshing to get a new villain going against the X-Men, and I think Kevin Bacon really knocked it out of the park. And really, before this movie, I don't remember Kevin Bacon like in that many films for a long while. So it was actually nice to see him and refreshing to see him in this movie. And it seems like he kind of fell off the map again, though, didn't he? Hopefully he gets back on. This movie is what you'd expect from the X-Men, you know, people that are hiding in fear because of those that are scared of them, because of how different they are. And the US government gets involved a little bit on this and takes the mutants in for a little bit, but tries to use them under their own influence until obviously the X-Men break apart later on. We also get a little bit of the US and the Russian army going at each other, and what can you say, man? This gives us a little history lesson on what life was like in the 1960s when JF Kennedy was trying to stop that Russian missile from hitting Cuba. So there's a little bit of that, but they obviously play around with it enough to they don't alter time, let's say, but it's fun when characters get involved with history. Let's just put it that way. It's always fun if you know how to have fun with it, and this movie definitely has fun with that. I also gotta say, this movie is probably the film with my favorite cameo of any movie. That's right, if you've seen this movie, you know what I'm talking about. And I'm not going to spoil it for anybody that doesn't it, but if you've seen the X-Men movies and you know one of its biggest stars, there's a nice little surprise in there for you to enjoy. So, with that being said, guys, I am giving X-Men First Class a 9 out of 10. This is definitely one of my all-time favorite X-Men movies. Right up there with X-Men 2 and Days of Future Past. Probably right in between them. That's right, X-Men First Class is my second favorite X-Men movie. And I love it. It's just a great time, a fun experience, and just a really cool film. If you haven't seen it, treat yourself to something fun. This is, especially if you enjoyed the other X-Men films, and even if you haven't, I suggest starting with this one, just because it is very different from the previous three X-Men movies. I think it's different enough that it can bring new viewers in, and it stands on its own really well. Plus the period piece, having it set in the 60s really brings it in a different level than the original X-Men movies. So I think it's interesting in a lot of ways. And I think that's what makes the X-Men First Class trilogy a lot of fun, where this movie takes place in the 60s, Days of Future Past takes place in the 70s, and then we got X-Men Apocalypse coming very soon, taking place in the 80s. I really like this three decades worth of this trilogy, and it's a lot of fun. And check this one out. Definitely has a lot of influence from those movies from the 60s, specifically the James Bond films. I remember Matthew Vaughn talking about the Sean Connery Bond films being a big influence, and if you watch those films and watch this film, there is a little bit of that in there. So I definitely recommend this movie. One of the best X-Men movies in my opinion. And until next time, guys, X-Men Apocalypse is almost here. I got one more X-Men movie to review, the Wolverine, the one where he goes to Japan. So hopefully I'll get to that very soon. Like this video if you agree with me, if you think X-Men First Class is one of the best X-Men movies. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, because I review all superhero movies plus more, as well as TV shows. And follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and until next time, take care.